Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new PennyWise podcast from Lee Enterprises. I'm your host, Teri Barr, and joining me today is Daphne Foreman. Now, Daphne is a banking and personal finance expert with Forbes Advisor. Daphne, thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much, Teri, for having me.
I'm going to start with a quote. Better to save and have it rather than not. Boy, that gets you right there. We're talking about savings today. Why is savings so important, especially after maybe what we've learned over the last year?
Well, yes, it's better to have it than not. That is the place to start. It's because if you don't have savings, even if it's not, let's take the COVID-ness off of it for a moment, even in just your regular financial life, if you don't have some sort of financial cushion between you and an opportunity or between you and utter despair, you risk making less optimal choices when the time comes. So for example, if you need money, you might throw something on a credit card, or you might make some other choice that is not as good. And so even though we cannot know what we don't know in terms of, for example, if we look back over the past year, I'm just beginning to see in my Facebook feed memories of a year ago, and what we thought we were going into with the COVID and the pandemic was nothing like what we experienced. And so I also want to acknowledge, because I know we'll talk about the COVID aspects of this a fair amount today, is to acknowledge the fact that it depends on where you are in this experience. I mean, we all are aware of this, but it's so easy to say, oh, this is such a tragedy. I'm so bored doing jigsaw puzzles or sourdough starter or whatever. And I was fortunate enough to be in a job that was remote to begin with. It continues. I have we all are hitting the COVID wall in various ways. We're also getting vaccinated, which is fabulous. But we want to be sure that we acknowledge the fact that there are people, for example, there's a stat going around just in the past few days. There are over $5 trillion in excess savings globally. There are just piles of money sitting around waiting to be spent. And they use lots of water analogies with it. A tsunami of money, pouring over the whatever. $2.6 trillion of this excess savings is in the United States.
So we need opportunity to spend,
yes,
I guess.
Yes, so we can all go spend. That is definitely a story. That's a major story.
Wow.
But it also means that for every person who is sitting on a big ocean of savings that they didn't expect, or they haven't been going out, they haven't been going to Broadway, they haven't been doing these things, there is someone for whom their livelihood ended on March 13th of 2020. They lost a job. I mean, and of course, the public health personal side of this, I don't know anyone at this moment who doesn't have someone they've lost to COVID.
Yes.
So you've got such a variety. There was a meme going around the internet that I never could get a really good source for, that said, we're not all in this, people say, oh, we're all in the same boat.
Right.
It's a crisis. It's now, we're all in the same boat. We're not all in the same boat. We're in the same ocean, but some people are on very comfortable ocean liners. Some people are under the water with their hand in the air. And so I know from working with a team of personal finance professionals that we always want to be sensitive to the fact that we're, in a situation like this, talking into an audience of people for whom they may have a pile of savings and they've tuned in to see, well, what can I do other than emergency savings? Because that's not very sexy. I'd rather buy a home. I'd rather take a trip, turn my career upside down. And there are people who don't know how they're going to make their rent.
Yes.
And so the part of the thing about savings that's so tricky is that it's very specific to you. It's not something where we can just, like with retirement, people are always wanting a number. What's my number? How many $100,000 million do I need to coast after age 62 or 5? And with savings, you also need a number, but there's not a number. It's not a one size fits all kind of scenario at all.
Wow. So I guess when we want to get started on savings or meet in the middle at some point,
right?
How do you do it? I mean, how do you make saving a habit? And that's probably part of it, isn't it? Just making it a habit.
If it were that easy, we'd all be doing it and we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Exactly.
Yes, it is not to get tripped up on the math, because they will say, the decades old financial person's advice on this is 3 to 6 months. of your living expenses socked away in what would be considered liquid savings, savings that you can get to, savings that's not at play in the market or locked up in a piece of real estate, but actual cash savings in an account somewhere. It could be savings, it could be CDs, it could be money market accounts, but money that you, not under the mattress preferably, but money that you can get to.
Right.
And the trick of it is, it can be daunting if you're someone who does not have the 3 to 6 months. And then, for example, there are now folks speaking, and it makes sense for a lot of individuals to look at a longer window than that. 3 to 6 months wouldn't do it. For example, I have a friend who closed a hair salon last March. Her livelihood was taken from her essentially, and she's now cutting hair on the beach on occasion, but you cannot cover a year of losing your livelihood with part-time work and whatever savings you would have had. And she's probably an excellent saver. But as we look at it, we want to be sure that you don't get frozen by the fact. It's kind of like when you look at, again, using retirement as an example, probably because I am not someone as prepared as I could be. If someone tells me you need $2 million to retire cleanly at such and such an age, it's very easy for me to just tune out. I don't have $2 million. I'm not going to get $2 million. Therefore, this conversation is not about me, and you sort of walk away. And with savings, you can always learn how to do it better. You can always, you really start where you are, and you look at, what does having money mean? What does being rich mean to you? To you, it might be several $1 million. To me, it might be $50 and a bus ticket. You don't know, what you want and what you need to feel as though you're living a rich life, or as though you're safe. Emergency savings are a function of having money that you want to spend versus having money that gives you peace of mind. And some folks would put a dollar value on peace of mind that far exceeds what it may look like.
I find that so interesting to think about it on an individual basis, that again, some general number just thrown at you, 3 to 6 months or $500 or whatever, doesn't apply to everyone. You need to look at your individual situation. And I don't know that I've heard a lot of people say that, but it really resonates.
Good. You need to make it is a very specific thing. It's not as specific. We won't say it's as specific as your fingerprint, because that's overly dramatic, but it is something. And especially with emergency savings, and the reason I brought up, if you go at it the way you go at dieting or flossing, it's not going to go well, because if it doesn't feel attractive to you, if you don't really connect with it, it's not going to work. And the way that you personalize it in terms of doing things, some people prefer to have more of a sort of an outgoing, an outbound sort of take on it. And they tell all their friends, I'm going to save this much money. I'm going to Cabo. Ask me if I've done it 3 weeks from now. Other people would prefer to save in the privacy of their own priorities and hearts. And that's why when you talk about savings, you see lots of writing about goals.
Yeah.
Because if you can personalize it, and it's not just this it's coming back to the COVID-ness. You've seen features where they show the docs and all the PPE, and they've got the mask and the shield and the thing. And then there are hospitals where there's a photo. There's an 8x10 photograph of the doctor's face, pasted on the front of their PPE, so that when a patient looks up and sees these 3 authority figures standing in front of them, they see that face. And there has been research done, I believe it was in India, if I'm not wrong, where they were looking at envelope budgeting and those kinds of things. And people who were saving for college for their children, who put a photo of their child on that envelope, saved more.
Oh, I love that.
Because you knew what you were doing. And it's why not only can you set separate goals for savings, you may be someone who's saving up for a down payment on a home. You may have a wedding coming up. You may have a vacation. You may have the perfect job and want to side hustle. You may not have the perfect job. You may want to be someone who reinvents themselves at some point. All of those lovely things, which are positive, attractive things, require a baseline of funding.
Okay.
You can't, money affects the choices that you get to make.
Yeah.
And even if you're someone who has tons of money, we assume you have more choices, but you're also bound up in what dealing with that much money is like. If you have only a little, you think, well, I don't have a lot of choices. You do. You have plenty of choices. They just may have more trade-offs.
Exactly.
with them. But to the extent that you can do individual savings goals, and even sometimes people will set up multiple accounts. You don't just have to have a savings account into which your savings goes. Some people will play psychological tricks for example, they'll put it in a seed. It's not as good to tie up money in a time-bound piece like a CD unless you're able to do several where you can get to the money one after the other, what's called a CD ladder. Okay. But you want this money to be accessible, but you also want it not to be too accessible.
Different accounts that you're talking about. I want to go back to your envelope example with the kids' faces on each envelope, saving for this school, saving for this kid's school. I love the idea also of all these different accounts as far as savings accounts for different things. Why haven't we thought of that before?
Well, we have in some ways. I mean, there is, for example, when you talk about budgets, you know, you have the 50, 20, 30 budget, you have zero-based budgeting. There also are envelope budgeting where you actually put money in envelopes. Now we don't, since we're not handling as much cash, that's not as likely. And for something that needs to be a significant sum, such as emergency savings, it may not be a physical envelope with dollar bills in it or Benjamins or whatever they would need to be. But in terms of the accounts you have at your bank, and so many people now have more than one banking relationship. You know, there are people who have a bank and the banker they've known forever, and that's they have a checking account, they have a savings account, they might have a mortgage. But then you also have folks who are busy shopping for APYs and best deals and the next neobank, challenger bank combo sort of banking thing that comes along. They're like, oh, I want that. I want that. There's a lot of shiny objects right now coming from fintech and traditional banking, trying to see how they can work best together to serve clients in an ideal scenario. That's what it's about, is to give their customers more options and more services. And emergency savings is not the time when you want to be obsessed with your APY, the interest rate that you earn, your annual percentage yield.
Which isn't great these days.
Savings is not so much about earning, you know, making money with the money. Savings is about having a pot of money in whatever form it takes, an envelope, an account, or whatever, that you know will be there, that you can reach for instead of your credit card, instead of being in some sort of actual distress. And so the individual accounts are come back to the psychological piece of, if I have a house, you also can see your progress. There's the issue of, if you have a bunch of money in a savings account and you're like, well, I shouldn't touch that, something terrible could happen.
Right.
And you have to, you want to build yourself some sort of cushion. And even if it's a small one, I mean, if you start where you are, even if it were $10 a week or $5 a week or $100 a week, whatever makes sense to you, it doesn't mean that you have to go from 0 to 6 months to a year of emergency savings locked away that you can't get to. Right. It also, I think we need to get back to having savings be fun. When I was in the 4th grade and they had that, the public school stuff where you buy a savings bond and it's going to make money, but it's going to take 7 years for it to happen. Saving was cool. Yes. And as we grow up, savings sort of becomes the bad guy and spending takes over. And except for some terrible thing that you have to cover for, savings accounts are just spending in the future. Savings, it's spending you're going to get to do. So if you could think of your savings account for your child's college fund, because when that time comes, your child will get to go to whatever school he or she they want to be in, and you know that you can handle it. Or you're saving for a vacation and you start flipping through pictures of where you're going, or you start, more likely you're on their phone as you're in between somewhere looking for it. To the extent that we can personalize it and make the savings goal something that's attractive to us, we're more, that takes us away from the, oh, I have to work out, oh, I need to floss problems, because then the more attractive it is to you, the more like you are to stick with it. And you mentioned habit earlier. The habit and just choosing to be a saver as part of who you are as a financial person is so much more important than where is it, what is the return on it, how much of it do I have? Because if you get into the habit of realizing that saving is as natural a thing to do with your money as spending it is, you'll be setting yourself up. And people can, but you have to get it. It has to reach you, because if you're just doing it because, oh, I'm supposed to do this, it won't be fun, and the money will not pile up at the speed you might want it to. It just won't. And like you see people who are, for example, the near religious zeal of people who sell life insurance. And some of those people are motivated by, it's very easy to say, because I have sold some life insurance my time. Oh, they just want a big commission. They want that first year commission. That math is in there. But the people that I know who are genuinely placing life insurance, which is a form of protection, or disability insurance, or even your homeowners, your property casualty rep, the people in insurance who are doing that from the heart are doing that because they understand the value of protection. You're not buying life insurance so that he can take a better vacation or she can take a better vacation. You're buying life insurance because you love the people that are affected by your financial life. And if something were to happen to you, they cannot replace you, but they can replace this financial value.
Mm-hmm.
Emergency savings is kind of in that same thing. It's something that is not the sexiest part of financial life. It's not the most fun, but you want to protect yourself, not only against the things that are truly tragic, like a global pandemic,
right?
A hurricane. We tend to think in dramatic sort of ways on, emergency fund, and there's a lot of action in the photo, but there are things that you don't see coming that are national, outside of you, extrinsic sort of emergencies. And then there are things that you do know are coming. For example, you have annual property tax payments, or you always want to take your kids on a vacation, or someone in your family needs additional training to become a coder. There are things you can predict. And so you're not only saving just, in that sort of grit your teeth, I have to save, but you're actually setting up your own future happiness and activity. It can be cool. I mean, I loved it in the 4th grade. I'm not nearly as good at it now. There have been some gaps along the way. I've come back to it. And even if you're starting from a very modest spot, just knowing if some small thing happens and you look and you go, I don't have to put that on my card. I will pay that for my debit. I'm paying cash for this because I've earned the money, I've spent the money, and I'm a responsible person.
And that makes you feel good. Yeah.
There are upsides to it as well. Emergency funds get kind of a bad rep.
Wow. So Daphne, what would you say is the bottom line for somebody who's listening to this? How do they get started, or why should they care about savings?
For the reasons we've talked about, it's a mix of peace of mind and of protection for those that you love and that are around you. And in terms of how you go about it, you need to make it a priority. It has to be something that matters enough to you that you get it done. And there really is no single number. The right number, the right amount of savings for you or for me is going to be as individual as we are. It has to do with your goals, what your financial situation is, if you have young children, if you have aging parents, and the caregiving, all of those things come into the conversation. And I think the main thing and sort of the bottom line feeling of it is, and pick a movie, any movie or any advertisement, just do it. Make it so.
Do it.
There is no try. I mean, there's lots of cliche ways to say it, but it's something that you don't want to walk away from. You don't want to look at it and go, oh, I couldn't do that. I don't have savings for an emergency, so I just won't bother to try. Right. And you certainly can always get better at it no matter where you're starting from. So if you sort of keep it in the, progress, not perfection part of your world, there is just so much uncertainty in the world, and for better or for worse, your money that you have is one of the ways that you participate in that world. Yeah. And to the extent that you can have savings that are there, it provides peace of mind. Yes, it pays bills if something terrible happens, but it also just rounds out the other things that you're doing in your financial life.
Oh, so smart. Daphne, thank you so much for joining us and just having this really interesting discussion about money in general, but savings in particular. And I think I'm going to have to check back in with you and see how I'm doing on my savings in a couple of months. See how
perhaps we'll have a challenge.
There we go. Maybe we should challenge everyone. Start saving.
But yes, to the extent that you can make it specific and know that it's about you, and keep asking the right questions. Always be questioning. Yes. What am I doing? Why am I doing it? What are the financial implications of this? And it can be much more satisfying than something that you have to do.
Exactly.
Find what works for you and your particular situation. Find your savings superpower if you have one.
Oh, the saving superpower. All right.
Let us discover our savings superpower and see what we can do with it.
Yes. Okay. I'm with you. On to the superpower of savings. Daphne Foreman. Daphne is the banking and personal finance expert with Forbes Advisor. Thank you again, Daphne. What a great conversation.
Thank you, Teri, so much. I appreciate your time. I've enjoyed it too.
This is your PennyWise podcast, and I'm Teri Barr.